Arjun said, with apparently a confused utterance, you seem to bewilder my intelligence. Tell me then decisively the one thing by which I can attain to the highest good. Arjun's utter confusion can be seen by the fact that he uses the word eva a lot in this verse. You see in the first line, you see in the second line, and so on. The word eva is used. What does the word eva means? You know. You know. If you're speaking to someone and in one sentence you say, you know you're doing this, and you know I went there, and you know. When someone uses you know a lot in one sentence, then they do not know what they're going to say next. Here, Arjun uses the word eva a lot, and therefore he doesn't know what he's going to do next. Arjun is confused because in the last chapter, Shri Krishna talked about action and knowledge interchangeably, and he's saying that Shri Krishna is bewildering his intelligence. You bewilder my intelligence. Many interpreters have made many interpretations of this word eva that's used a lot. Sridhar Bhagavan says, Param karoni kasya tava moho katva nashtadyeva tatapi pranta mayam bhavati iti shabded na pudita, meaning, Lord, you're compassionate, and therefore it's not your nature to make someone bewildered, but there's a lot of confusion in my mind, and that is why I feel like this. God can never make us bewildered because God is giving us his message and not trying to confuse Arjun. For Shri Krishna, the more Arjun's mind gets concentrated and the more Arjun gets ready for battle, then the better it would be. Therefore, Sridhar Swami says that by using the word eva, Arjun is saying that whatever Shri Krishna says must be right, but Arjun's mind is bewildered and therefore he feels like that. Guruji has already said that a confused mind always keeps asking questions, and this confusion is Arjun's. Another interpreter of the Gita, Shankaracharya ji, said, Yadyapi vivika viktayata bhagavan tathapi mama madhye buddhe vyamisham eva bhagavad vakya patipati vyamisham eva, meaning, Shri Krishna, you speak very clear words and you're all seeing and all knowing, but I lack this intelligence in my mind and I cannot understand, and that is why I feel like this. That is why Arjun uses the word eva. Whether this worldly life or withdrawal from this worldly life, Arjun just wants one clear answer for Shri Krishna as to what he should do. Look at that. Tell me the one thing by which I can attain to the highest good. If you look at the history of the world, then this worldly life and withdrawal from this worldly life have always kept alternating. In both Eastern thought and Western thought, human beings have always asked this question that Arjun is faced with. Are actions necessary for our spiritual development? If you put the first two verses of this chapter together, Arjun was first asking Shri Krishna why he was forcing him to go to war, and then tells Shri Krishna, instead, tell him what would be good for him. Therefore, Arjun thinks that his good is not in acting at all. As an example, if someone is giving you milk, then you may ask them why they're giving you milk by force, because you want tea and not milk. Arjun wants his own good, and therefore asks Shri Krishna not to involve him in this war. Can spiritual development take place without action? More precisely, Arjun wants to know whether one can attain spiritual bliss without doing anything. Guruji has written this using double negatives of legal terminology. Mira, Veena, all of you will know about this. If the answer to the question is no, then Arjun will be free from doing any actions, and that's what Arjun's looking for. Is this worldly life better, or is this withdrawal from worldly life better? In ancient Greece, where Western philosophical thought started between 1500 to 3000 years ago, Homer was a well-known philosopher. Not the cartoon character in The Simpsons, the philosopher. He gave the message of taking up worldly life and told people to do worldly deeds. He said that there's no point in not doing worldly deeds. His view was that if people keep doing worldly deeds, then the result would be happiness, because people get material possessions and the basic necessities in life. The entire Greek civilization adopted this view of happiness through worldly deeds. However, when the civilization became excessively worldly, this led to havoc and destruction throughout the civilization. At that time, Pythagoras came, Pythagoras' theorem. Pythagoras taught withdrawal from worldly life. He believed in retirement and said that worldly life is not needed. He said that people get all their sorrows from running after objects. The civilization then adopted this, but the problem was that this too became excessive. The society kept going from one end to another like a pendulum. Worldly life, then withdrawal, then worldly life, then withdrawal. During Homer's time, worldly life became excessive, and then under Pythagoras, people started withdrawing from worldly life. The latter grew so much that when Dionysus came in Greece, it became so excessive that it said that Dionysus spent his entire life in a wooden barrel. His entire life. He thought that I would only have to do work if I come outside this barrel. He did not want to perform any actions. It was a total retirement because they thought that actions lead to bondage, and they did not want to create any bondage or faults in actions. This didn't work either. Then came Epicurus. He gave the thought that if there's total retirement in society, then society becomes stagnant. How could society develop like this? Nobody would do anything. Everyone would just be sitting there. Epicurus convinced people to go back to worldly life. Now people could learn from the past to the present, from the precedent, that if people become too worldly in favor of sensual happiness, then there will be destruction. And if people start retiring from society, then society would become stagnant and would not develop. Epicurus gave everyone a golden mean. He told people that if they do good deeds, then there would be no sin, good deeds. He said that people should do actions, but in a good way, and therefore they would then be happy. Once again, society started going back to worldly life, and then tried to do good deeds. However, as time went on, what happened? People forgot about the word good in good deeds, and everyone became worldly again. At that time, who came? Christ, and the Christian religion came. Christ brought back the message from withdrawal from worldly life. Even this didn't work because the Christian religion became split into different parts. The Catholics preached withdrawal from worldly life, and then the Protestants said that one must become engaged in worldly affairs. So Protestants became very worldly, and this is how we went forward between time, the split, the Catholics and the Protestants. When we look at Indian history, Vedic thought right at the beginning had this nice balance between worldly life and retirement from worldly affairs. We had brahmachari ashrams, places of study for celibates, for the first 25 years of one's life. The pupils would go and stay with the guru and would learn all the knowledge they needed from life in those years. The next 25 years, from the ages of 26 to 50, would then be for material happiness. From the age of 51, people were told to reduce their worldly enjoyments, but not to make a total withdrawal. In the Western world, and in the Eastern world even now, people retire at 60 or 70. A person may be working somewhere for 30 years and just retires when 1st of April comes, when he turns 65, 70. He would become completely shocked at the change in his life, because he was going to work from 9 to 5, or for lawyers 9 to 5 in the morning all these years, and now there's a total retirement. Psychologists have discovered that the majority of people who work throughout their entire lives and then suddenly retire die within 2 to 3 years of retiring. This is because there's a sudden void. People were busy, so busy throughout their entire lives, and there's a sudden void where there's nothing to do, so a person just becomes killed in his mind. When a person becomes finished in his mind, then he becomes finished in his body. In Vedic thought, people between the ages of 51 to 71 had to spend half the time in the homes and half the time in the jungles. They had to spend half the time with the family and half the time as a society. They had to slowly cut down the times on relationships with their families and worldly affairs and increase their relationship with society. After the age of 75, there was total retirement. One does not have any family or any responsibilities. If they have any responsibilities, then it would be towards God and towards their souls. They would have no obligations to fulfill. Finally, after 25 to 30 years, their deaths would come. Such a beautiful system was designed by Vedic thoughts, and Kalidas wrote something very nice about the Raghuvansh, which is the clan of Sri Ram. It comes at the beginning of Raghuvansh. Sahana Janma Shudananam Afalodaya Karmanam Asudatakshishanam Avakatavayatmanam. Then while describing what the Raghuvansh was like, he wrote how they always did the right activities at the right age. Sheshva Pitya Asta Vidanam Yova Vishena Shinam Vadake Muni Vruktinam Yoge Nante Tanujnan Ragunan Anuram Vakishya. So that means during their childhoods they would accumulate wisdom, then during their early adult life they would enjoy material pleasures. From the middle point of their lives they would start giving back to society, and then at the end of their lives they would leave their bodies having attained union with God. Such were the Raghuvansh. Such a life was a norm at the time. Remember, we're always taking a lot of society, and those that do not give back to society, those that give back to society do not have to fall back into 7 more births. Those people that keep taking from society all the way even to the age of 90 will eventually have to give it back to society. Otherwise, how could there be a balance? Only when you give back what you withdraw will there be a balance. Those that are reborn still have things to give back to society. If God gives someone a nice business and a nice shop and they just keep everything they've got, then God will think twice before giving that person a birth like that again. They would never get a human birth immediately after that life. So make sure you're always paying back to society, and the sooner you do, the better. Then, after that, the later Vedic age came, and that's when the Upanishads were written. During this time, withdrawal from worldly affairs became mainstream. Slowly, people started doing fewer and fewer activities. In the Upanishads, discussions about wisdom became more important. Then, the Karmakan period came, and worldly affairs became dominant. You see that this time, people used to do very big yagnas like we're doing now, such as Vishnu Yag, Ashmaya Virak, and many others. There were a lot of actions and preparations during this period. After that, Sri Krishna came, and in the Gita, he restored the balance once again. He said that actions and knowledge are both important. Both have the same amount of importance. He gave this wisdom that with time, worldly affairs once again became dominant in society. The sacrifices and rituals became excessive again, but then came who? 2 great personalities, Buddha and Mahavir in Indian history. Both of them were reformists. They saw injustices, they saw human sacrifices and other bad things that had crept into the yagnas, and they both opposed this. They both said no to deity worship and took out all the divisions in society. You see from both Buddha's and Mahavir's disciples that anyone could join, be they Brahmins or Shudras. Not only could any type of person join, but including women, some of Buddha's greatest disciples were women, but also could people of any age. In ancient India, there were age limits in religious matters. One could only become a sannyasi, one who renounces everything, at a young age. 1200 years later, Srimad Adi Shankaracharya became a sannyasi at the age of 9. And a lot of influential Brahmins opposed this and told him to leave the establishment. Society was very odd. Shankaracharya was the one that was going to spread the thoughts, but they removed him from the establishment. If Shankaracharya was not going to spread the thoughts, then who would? Yet they still removed him from the establishment. They told Adi Shankaracharya that if he became a sannyasi at the age of 9, they would not give his mother the proper funeral ritual arrangements at her death. Shankaracharya said, that's not a problem for me. Mother, you remember me? I will come. And he really did come at the end. Sannyasis are meant to break all ties and leave their home. They are not allowed to come back and do all of this, but Shankaracharya was an exception. He did go in the end. It is even said in the scriptures that he went and picked up the pieces of his mother's body to give her the proper funeral rites. At that time, withdrawal from the world was prevalent because Buddha and Mahavir said that anyone from any age could become a sannyasi. What was the problem there? People were leaving their homes. People were going to them from their childhood age, and therefore retirement became common in society. Then there was Mandan Mishra, and he once again gave dominance to worldly affairs. It said that when Shankaracharya first went to meet Mandan Mishra, Mandan Mishra was performing a yagna. Having seen Shankaracharya Ji there in a robes of sannyasi, Mandan Mishra started making fun of Adi Shankaracharya Ji and his clothes, because Mandan Mishra was very much in favor of a worldly life. At that time, Srimad Adi Shankaracharya Ji once again explained the balance between worldly affairs and withdrawal from worldly life. He showed the balance between knowledge, actions and devotion. Thereafter, Ramanujacharya Ji and Srimad Vallabhacharya Ji came, and they showed the way of a worldly life. They preached the message of devotion to God and God's grace, called Pushti Marg, which is a very worldly philosophy. They said to wake up in the morning and enjoy God's grace in everything, and there were 4 scriptures supporting their philosophies. They were worldly philosophies, but they took worldly life in the right direction. They said to do worldly things such as cooking food for the people in your house, but to do this as if you're cooking for God. This was 500 years ago, and worldly life became dominant. More recently, in the last 200 years, many saints such as the Swami Narayan sect and also Swami Dayananda and Saraswati took society more towards retirement. They said that one should not live a material life and one should not have a need for objects. The women are to be renounced. The revolution started again, and people started to accept this. Therefore, in the 10,000 years or so of the Indian civilization, there have been cycles of the dominance of thoughts leading to either worldly life or retirement. Okay? That's the history of both the West and East, worldly life and retirement. Arjun is asking Shri Krishna here, tell me the one thing. He's trying to give him the right answer so he can make a decision. He doesn't know which decision to make, and therefore he's bewildered. Arjun is talking as if he knows a lot, but we can tell from his words either that he does not know. Shri Krishna understands that Arjun doesn't know. In Buddhist Zen monasteries, there's often a teacher sitting there and his students as well. The students have come to the teacher to learn wisdom, and each of the students have a set place where they always stay. Guruji's, we have a surprise again at the end of this class. When Guruji gives his Srimad Bhagavad discourses, people always bring an item so they can reserve their seats, so whenever they get up from the breaks. From the first day in the Zen monasteries, it was a part of the people's initiations that the teacher tells them which mat to sit on, and they just sit there. They're not allowed to get up from the mats, and they have to sit in the same mats. When the discourse is finished and they've learned the wisdom, then they can get up from the mat. When they feel that all the doubts are finished, then they've learned all the wisdom that they need, then they know the meaning of life, then they take their mats, roll them up in a circle, and they leave the monastery. Nobody needs to tell them to go. Once they take the mat and go, then that means that they have the required wisdom, and there's no more questions in their minds. This is because once one has acquired all wisdom, then there is no need to ask questions. After one has all the wisdom, then they know that they're wisdom. They know that they're knowledgeable, they know that they're knower, and they also know that they're the subject of the knowledge. They know that they're the knowledge, they're knowledgeable, they're also the knower, and they're the subject of the knowledge. They're all 3 of them. It is said in the Upanishads, then when a person that says that they have all the knowledge, then just consider that they don't have the knowledge. They don't have the knowledge. If they have all the knowledge, then there would be no need for them to say it. At this point, if Arjuna has acquired all the knowledge, then he would have immediately picked up his bow and went to fight. But he has not lifted up his mat or his bow, and is sitting at the back of the chariot. Arjuna uses beautiful words when he asks Shri Krishna to tell him the one thing he should do. Look at this, the one thing he should do. This is a thirst for true knowledge. Arjuna just wants to know the one thing he should do. There are people that are just interested in words, and after listening to discourses, they start discussing the topics with others because they just like talking. Arjuna is not one of these, because he wants to know one definite answer. He doesn't want to go into different opinions. He wants to know the one right thing for him to do. He is interested in what is right. In this world, 2 things come up in front of us all the time. Radhakrishnan has translated this as the good and the pleasant. This is the title of this class, the good and the pleasant. there's a large difference between the two. Things that are pleasant are things that we like and we enjoy, whereas that which is good, is good for our welfare. The majority of people are confused about the two. The majority of people are held back when thinking about what is good for their welfare, and they become a prey to what is pleasant for them. The person becomes so obsessed with what he enjoys doing, that he forgets about what he should do, the one thing he should do. You see a lot of small children who are so obsessed with playing with their toys that it's time to go for school, but they cannot get ready and change their clothes. This is because the child enjoys the toys too much. A person's death is around the corner, and he's still obsessed with material things. When Guruji sees an 85-year-old flicking through the stock market listings of the newspaper, then Guruji feels sorry for him. He's not saying that this is wrong. In fact, it's necessary. But the person is 85, and he must learn to leave these things at some point. A person that is obsessed with what he enjoys completely forgets about what is good for him. The highest good for man is not pleasure, but moral goodness. Many people get held back in the latter. They run after pleasure and go so far that they forget what it's like to have that true bliss. Plato says that the driving force of humans is two things: an innate device for pleasure and an acquired judgment that aspires after excellence. Two things Plato says that's the driving force of human beings: an innate desire for pleasure and an acquired judgment that aspires after excellence. A person thinks that the whole life is about pleasure and forgets about that true bliss that the psychologist Abraham Maslow describes as a peak experience. What is it described as? Any business students? Self-actualization, the peak experience. Freud initiated, Danny would have heard that piece of Mind Talk, Freud initiated Western thoughts of psychology, and then Carl Jung came after him, and after Carl Jung there was Maslow. What is the difference between the good and the pleasant? First of all, the person that chases after the pleasant chases after objects. The consequence of chasing after the pleasant is an object, and the consequence of doing the good is liberation and the bliss of God. The consequence of chasing after pleasant is going after an object, and the consequence of doing the good is liberation and the bliss of God. Secondly, the pleasant is always repetitive, and you have to do the same thing over and over again. When you were 4, you went to your uncle's wedding. When you were 24, you got married. When you turn 54, you get your children married. When you turn 84, you get your grandchildren married. What have you done your entire life? This is repetitiveness. A little child gets a dolls married, then she grows up to be married herself, then she gets the children married, then she gets her grandchildren married. This is repetitiveness. You think that you'll get happiness? Do you think you'll get happiness from this? Think about it. Is this good for you or pleasant for you? Because it's very difficult to differentiate the two. We get so wrapped up in what's pleasant that you don't even think about what's good for us. Sit down and quietly think about your life and the way you're living it. The first thought that may come up in your mind is that your life is running fine. Then think about whether the things that make you happy in life are repetitive. If it is repetitive, then it's a pleasure and not good for you. On the other hand, that which is good for you is not repetitive. There's a Sanskrit phrase, dine dine navam navam. Every day it creates a new experience for you. Mind well, what society tells you is good for you may be a pleasure. One prays every day and society says that praying is a good thing. But if it becomes mere repetition and you get support from it, then think that it's not good but a pleasure. The prayers and the chanting of God's name meditation should give you new experiences every day. The process may be repetitive, but you should experience something new. For example, today God is telling me this. Today my God is doing this. Today when I did name chanting with prayer beads, then I experienced this. Even if it is repetitive and you just chant one mantra, then if it brings new experiences every day, then it is good for you. This is where the difference is. Things that are good for you often take the disguises of pleasures, and things that are pleasurable often take the form of things that are good for you. Things that are repetitions are pleasures, and things that create new experiences for you every time are good for you. Pleasures, in the end, are like the bulls of oil men in India. You get pulled by them for a long time, and in the end, you realize that they have used you. The bulls of oil men in India keep walking all day. They have a bell around their throats, and the bells just keep ringing. Guruji has seen the shops of these oil men in the village. Inside they have they have these shops that go around, like a opened, what do you call it, a roadshow shop. Inside they have a bull walking around the oil machine, and outside the person is just sitting there selling oil, or is just asleep on the cart. People ask them, how you can have a bull just walking around inside? What if the bull stops walking? The oil man says he knows straight away if the bull stops walking because he's tied the bell around the bull's throat. While the bell is ringing, he knows that the bull is walking. If the bull stops walking, then he will know because the bell will stop ringing. He can just sit outside selling oil, and the bull is just walking inside the shop. One professor asked the oil man, is it not possible that a bull can just stand in one place and shake its head so the bell keeps ringing? What did the oil man say? The oil man gave a very good answer. He said, Professor, this is a bull and not a professor. If this is a professor, then it would have thought of all of this. The bull just keeps running the oil machine, walking around, which is a repetitive process, but just stays in one place. There is no development in this. That's the third thing. There's no development in chasing after pleasures. There is development in following the good. The road of pleasures is like the road of a car. There is never anything new to it. I'm going to continue the example of weddings. One has his own wedding, then his son's wedding, then his grandson's wedding. There's nothing new in this. Before today, millions of people have been married, and after today, millions of people will get married. Sit down and quietly think about the stresses one goes through at weddings, and how was it ever worth it? When one's son or daughter is getting married, then one loses the plot completely. Before today, so many people have had their weddings, and many people are going to have weddings. We are doing nothing new in this. The path is already set. It's already been treaded, and still people go mad shouting about it. The path of what is good for you is original. It is original. You have to tread your own path. There can only be one Sri Ram. There can only be one Sri Krishna. There can only be one Buddha. There can only be one Mahavir, because when they came into the world, there were many pre-prepared paths, but they left all routes and created a new one. That is why they became great personalities. There can only be one Guru Nanak. There can only be one Mira, both the Mira here and the Mira in Rajasthan. There can only be one Nasi Mehta. There can only be one Kabir. You have to tread your own path. That is the way of what is good for you. What is good for you is not about what has been done in the past. What is pleasurable for you is about doing what has already been done in the past. It's only because that thing has been done in the past because of that pleasurable thing gives you security. You do not have to do anything new. It has already been done. When a form comes, then you just have to fill out the blanks. Aside from that, everything is ready. But with the path of the good, you have to do something new. You have to do something original. There is originality, the fourth thing, in the good. One reason why there is security in pleasures is that the majority of people are in pleasures, i.e. the working class, the proletariats. These people just get on with their business and have no hassles. They're the majority of society. But with the path of the good, you have to do something that is uncommon. A lion in a jungle walks alone. Remember this example. A lion in a jungle walks alone. It has no companions. With pleasures, you have to do what someone has done before, and you do not have to be anyone else, anything else. A story in India that there was once a guru and 400 pupils. They had left on a pilgrimage. They were passing through a jungle. The guru was walking ahead and was lost in his own thoughts about the Supreme Being. The pupils were behind him and were split into groups of about 2 or 3. The pupils just watched the guru in front of them and followed the direction that the guru went in. There are often lots of thorns on a walking surface in jungles, so they stayed on the main track. The Guru saw a sheep lying on the floor nearby. The sheep had been hurt by a thorn and it was bleeding. The Guru resolved that he wanted to help that poor sheep. With compassion, he bent down, pulled the thorn from the sheep's foot. He then rubbed the sheep's foot and got up to start walking again. He threw the thorn away to one side. The people started following him and saw the teacher had pulled something out of the sheep and had thrown it away. This was a pleasure because they were following something that had already been done in the past. Each of the pupils started to do exactly what the Guruji had done and began pulling things out of the sheep. A sheep has a lot of wool, so each of the pupils started picking up a handful of wool and threw it away. Remember, there were 400 pupils. If 400 pupils pull a handful of wool from the sheep, then what happens to the sheep? And by that time this incident finished, the sheep became without wool. Pleasures are always something that has been done in the past. You do not need to think while the person in front of you did what he did. Remember this. You do not need to think while the person in front of you did what he did. He did what he did, and you just have to concentrate on what you want to do. With pleasures, next one, number 6, you have to think about going down one route, that route, without thinking. Whereas in the good, one cannot go down the route without thinking. And the pleasure part of pleasures, one goes down the route without thinking, whereas with the good, you cannot go down that route without thinking. With each step on the path of the good, you have to think, am I right? With each step, you have to do an introspection on the path of the good. Arjun is taking the path of the good, and therefore, he's asking Shri Krishna in this verse so that he can make sure of it first. The path of pleasures, 7th, is useless in the end, and the path of the good is meaningful in the end. The person that goes in the direction of pleasures feels that everything is futile in the end. That is why you see 70 or 80-year-olds, or even people of a younger age, now that things are moving so fast these days, who tell God, just take me now. Just take them, because everything seems so futile to them. They think they've done everything and they need to do, and now so what? Now people feel like this when they're 30 or 40. You ask people of this age how their life is, and they just say, pulling on, like a bull. Because they've already done the things they want to enjoy, and now they're just pulling on. The path of pleasures is useless at the end, and the path of the good is meaningful in the end. People that follow the path of pleasures never find anything meaningful. That is why you never hear great personalities talking about the deaths. Anyone can have the deaths anytime they want, but you cannot have liberation anytime you want. An 80-year-old person is telling God to take him, and you think of what philosophical words he's saying, asking God to take him. Compare this to great saints and knowledgeable people. Srimad Adi Shankaracharya ji said, Asvatam saye cham jananin jananam ya marmana hudani hudani shiva shiva bhavani ki chapata, meaning, oh mother, give me rebirth. The saints of Maharashtra say, Sukhamare gare vasi sukhe gala va mahasi, meaning, give us rebirth. The Gujarati saint Narsi Mehta says, Harina janato muktina mage mage jananam janam avare nita seva nita kirtam ocho nikatva nanda kumare, meaning, the Lord's devotees do not ask for liberation, but for birth after birth, so they can do more service, more singing about God, and find more meaning in the devotion towards the Lord. The path of pleasures is useless in the end, and the path of the good is meaningful in the end. 8th, the person going on a path of pleasures falls into bondage. The person on a path of the good enjoys good things that are enjoyable, but only after understanding them, and therefore he does not, or she does not, fall into bondage. Do not think that the person going on the path of the good does not enjoy things that are enjoyable. Big mistake. No, he definitely enjoys them, but he enjoys them with the understanding, and therefore he doesn't fall into bondage. When a person chasing pleasures is not near enjoyable objects, then he falls into worry, and that is why he creates bonds. A person who's going after that which is good has a different attitudes. If he gets enjoyable things, then he gets happy, but if he does not, then he doesn't think about these enjoyments. Guruji gives a very simple example very often. If Srimad Adi Shankaracharya was given an ice cream or Indian sweet called Sikand, he would enjoy it and even say that it tastes nice. He would not tell people to take it away from him, but if the Sikand or the ice cream was not in front of him, he would not think that he hasn't eaten it for a few days. He would never have a thought like, I have not eaten the Sikand or the ice cream for 1 week. He would never have a thought like that. If a common person is not in front of the enjoyable object, then he just thinks about it, and this is a characteristic of the person that just goes after the path of pleasures. But a person that follows the path of the good enjoys that enjoyable object, but immediately forgets about it as soon as it is gone. Okay, 9. A person who chases after pleasures worries after enjoyable objects, and therefore his mind and his intellect are scattered. Whereas a person who treads on the path of good has a steady mind and a steady intellect, sthita prajna. If one wants to make the mind and intellect steady, then they must leave the path of pleasures and go on the path of good. The desire for things on the path of pleasures makes one greedy and covetous. The person going on the path of good can never be greedy or covetous. Prajayati kaman sarvan pata manogatan atmayatmana tushyate sitapagna satushte. This is because the happiness does not come from outside, it comes from within. The happiness doesn't come from outside, it comes from within. How then can such a person be greedy or covetous? If your happiness comes from outside, then you can be greedy or covetous. The person on the path of the good knows this and therefore seeks for happiness inside. Such a person can never have greediness or covetousness for things on the outside. Okay, number 10. The path of pleasures is that which makes the mind and the body happy. The path of the good is that which makes the soul happy. And it can do good for the mind and the body as well, but primarily makes the soul happy. The path, okay, that's number 10. Okay, number 11, the path of the good is real, where the path of pleasures is an illusion. That's 11. Number 12, things in the path of pleasures are only dear to you when you do not have them. When they come, then they lose that effect. The path of the good is real. So how much one runs, okay, no, this is number 13. How much one runs on the path of pleasures, one can never reach a destination. Whereas the person on the path of the good just feels satisfied by walking on the path. However much one runs after material happiness, one never feels that he has reached. Guruji and I want to say from the beginning that material happiness is not wrong, because if you have material happiness with understanding, then you can walk on the path of the good. There's a part of a Gujarati poem that just reads, laying out my cars that night, the whole night went, I forgot about sleeping, and the morning that just came. Laying out my cars at night, the whole night went away, I forgot about sleeping, and the morning just came. This is the state of a person who chases after the path of pleasures. Number 14, when a person that goes in the path of the good, he goes towards God, actually, part of number 13, he's going towards God, he's just happy by being on that path. When you're on that right road, you know that it's God's compassion. The happiness is just on the road. Last difference, the final difference, is a path of pleasures is very sweet in the beginning, but in the end is very burning. The path of the good may feel difficult at first, but in the end it gives humans the ultimate bliss and the ultimate peace. And therefore, Shri Krishna, Arjun has asked Shri Krishna to tell him what is good for him. On that note, we're going to finish. We spent the entire class just on 2 verses. We discussed the good and the pleasurable. In the next class, we're going to discuss, Shri Krishna is going to start speaking from the rest of the chapter. Arjun's asked his 2 questions. Shri Krishna is going to start speaking and is going to discuss the maintenance of the body. Because very easy to say that I'm not going to act, but you can't even maintain your body without acting. And not really good thing that Guruji said last week. If you think that you're withdrawing from the world by going to the forest, there's still a world in the forest. The world still exists. You can still perform karmas. A person can incur more bondage by sitting on a chair and thinking about the fruits of action than performing actions. And we're going to go, Shri Krishna is going to describe the twofold paths of knowledge and also of action. And he's going to say that on verse 4, that you can't, neither by abstention of work does a man attain freedom from action, nor by mere renunciation, because there's two paths. The path of action for people who are extroverts, and the path of knowledge for people who are introverts. And Shri Krishna will say in the 5th verse that you cannot even maintain the body without doing work. We're going into much deeper examples. It's similar to this class. We're only going to do about 2 or 3 verses for the whole class. And it's going to be a very detailed study. So that's the end of this class. We're going to bow down and say our prayer.